Welcome to African Mafia Stories, where loyalty is currency, power has a price, and every city hides a secret. Today's story is based in Tanzania, but before the story begins, if you could visit any African country, where would you go and why?
The Indian Ocean breathed like a living thing that night. Slow. Heavy. Ancient. From the balcony of the half-finished hotel overlooking the harbor in Dar es Salaam, I watched cargo cranes swing across the dock like giant metal vultures while rain drifted over the city in silver curtains. Down below, engines growled. Music leaked from clubs along the waterfront. Somewhere deeper in the maze of streets, someone screamed once, then stopped. Nobody looked up. That was Tanzania. Beautiful enough to make you lower your guard. Dangerous enough to punish you for it. My name is Baraka Mshana, and by the time I met the South African woman with the amber eyes and the pistol hidden inside her handbag, 3 men were already trying to kill me. I just didn't know she was one of them. The first warning arrived floating in the harbor. A body. Male. Mid-30s. Expensive watch. No shoes. The fisherman found him tangled beneath a dock near the Kigamboni ferry crossing just before sunrise. By lunchtime, everybody important already knew. Because dead men float differently when they belong to syndicates. I stood inside the fish market while traders shouted prices around us and flies circled hanging snapper. Inspector Mwita lit a cigarette beside me without taking his eyes off the corpse being loaded into the police van. "You know him?" he asked. "No." "You are lying." "Probably." Mwita snorted smoke through his nose. He was one of the few honest policemen left in Dar, which meant he looked exhausted all the time. Sweat stained his collar despite the morning rain. His pistol hung loose on his hip like even it had lost hope. "The Russians are angry," he said quietly. "That sounds expensive. They think you took something." I glanced toward the ocean. "They always think that." Mwita stepped closer. "This time they are killing people. That's usually how anger works. You joke too much for a man standing near a grave. And you worry too much for a man still alive." But the truth was simpler. I was worried too. Because I knew exactly what they were looking for. And if the Russians were searching this hard, it meant somebody had betrayed everybody. Again. That evening, I went to the Palace. Worst name for a nightclub in East Africa. Everybody still called it that because the owner had once imported marble from Italy and filled the entrance with fake gold lions. Now the lions were chipped, the marble was cracked, and half the politicians who secretly owned the place were laundering money through fuel contracts. Still, the whiskey was real. And criminals love consistency. The music inside hit like a heartbeat. Amapiano rolled through the building while dancers moved beneath blue lights and cigarette smoke. Rich men laughed too loudly. Women in silk dresses glided between tables like sharpened knives. Then I saw her. Standing alone at the bar. Black dress. Gold earrings. Tall. Beautiful in the dangerous way storms are beautiful from far away. She held herself like somebody used to being watched. Not admired. Measured. Her accent reached me before her eyes did. South African. Johannesburg, maybe. She noticed me staring and smiled slightly. That should have been my first reason to leave. Instead, I walked over. "Tourist?" I asked. "Do I look lost?" "No. You look expensive. And you look like trouble. That obvious. To women with survival instincts." "Yes." Her smile deepened. "I'm Masa." I shook her hand. Warm fingers. Steady grip. No fear. That was reason number 2 to leave. Women who feared nothing in cities like Dar es Salaam were usually connected to men who owned cemeteries. "Baraka," I said. "Masa from where?" I asked. "South Africa. Big place. So is Tanzania." I laughed. Fair enough. The bartender slid her another drink. She hadn't touched the first one. Interesting. You here for business? I asked. Aren't we all? There it was. The hidden blade inside the sentence. I leaned against the counter. And what business brings a South African woman to da? She finally looked directly into my eyes. Long enough to feel like a fingerprint. Maybe I'm looking for someone. The music pulsed around us. Rain hammered the windows. Somewhere behind me, a bottle shattered. I should have walked away then. Instead, I asked the question that changed everything. And what happens when you find him? Masa smiled without warmth. That depends, she said softly. On whether he deserves to survive. And somewhere deep inside my chest, instinct finally woke up too late. The thing about survival is this. Your body notices danger before your mind does. Mine noticed Masa 3 seconds before the shooting started. Her eyes shifted past my shoulder. Not fear. Calculation. Then her hand moved under the counter. I turned just as the front windows exploded inward. The nightclub erupted. Glass sprayed across the dance floor like diamonds thrown from heaven. People screamed. Music cut out mid-beat. 2 gunmen stormed through the entrance firing compact rifles into the ceiling while a third moved toward the VIP section with terrifying calm. Professionals. Not drunk gangsters trying to impress each other. The first body hit the floor beside me. A senator's son. 22 years old. Dead before he understood why everyone was running. Down. I roared. Masa was already moving. Not panicking. Moving. Big difference. She grabbed my arm and yanked me behind the bar just as bullets shredded the shelves above us. Bottles burst overhead. Whiskey rained onto the floor. The bartender crawled away sobbing with blood running down one side of his face. I stared at Masa. You carry a gun in your handbag. You ask too many questions. She pulled a compact pistol free with smooth efficiency. Not civilian handling. Training. Real training. The third gunman spotted us and raised his rifle. Masa fired fast. 2 shots. Controlled. The man dropped instantly. My eyebrows lifted despite the chaos. Well, I muttered. That's attractive. Focus. The remaining attackers split apart through the crowd, searching. For me. Not random violence. Targeted. Which meant somebody had sold my location less than an hour after I arrived. Again. I hated betrayal. Mostly because it was becoming repetitive. Back exit, Masa said. You know the building. No. I know ambushes. Another burst of gunfire tore through the club. Rich businessmen flattened themselves behind overturned tables while security guards disappeared completely. Typical. Outside, thunder rolled across Dar es Salaam. Inside, death was getting closer. Masa picked over the counter. They are boxing us in. How many? 4 left. You counted that already. I like staying alive. Fair. I grabbed a fallen bodyguard's pistol from the floor and checked the magazine. Half full. Story of my life. The nearest gunman advanced around the VIP booths carefully, scanning through smoke and flashing emergency lights. I recognized him. Congolese mercenary. Name, Kasongo. Worked protection details for smugglers moving weapons through East Africa. Mean enough to shoot children. Disciplined enough not to enjoy it. He saw me. Too late. I fired twice. Kasongo spun backward into a table. The nightclub exploded into screaming again. Move. I shouted. Masa didn't hesitate. We sprinted through the kitchen while cooks ducked beneath counters and steam hissed from overturned pots. Behind us, boots thundered across broken glass. One of the gunmen shouted in Russian. That tightened something cold inside me. Because Russians rarely traveled this far south unless the money was enormous. Or the revenge was personal. Masa slammed through the back door fast. Rain swallowed us immediately. Dar es Salaam at night felt alive during storms. Streets flooded within minutes. Neon signs reflected off black water while border borders swept between traffic like ghosts. We ran through an alley behind the club. Then Masa stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with her. What? She pointed upward. Rooftop. Sniper. I saw the muzzle flash a fraction too late. Crack. Concrete exploded beside my head. Masa dragged me sideways behind a packed delivery truck as another round punched through metal. Your friends are committed, she snapped. They are not my friends. You understand what I mean. Another shot hit the truck. Closer. The sniper was adjusting. Professional. Very professional. Rain poured off Mosa's face as she checked her pistol calmly. You got another escape route. Working on it. That's not comforting. A motorcycle engine rode nearby. I looked toward the street entrance. Young rider. Helmet. Black raincoat. No plates. He skidded into the alley and tossed me a second helmet. Boss, he yelled. Now. Juma. Thank God. 20 years old. Reckless. Loyal. Possibly insane. Basically the closest thing I had to family. Masa looked between us. You trust him? No, I said honestly. Perfect. Let's go. The sniper fired again as we climbed onto the motorcycle. Juma launched us into the flooded streets just as bullets ripped through the alley wall behind us. Traffic scattered. The bike screamed between buses and taxis while rain lashed against my face hard enough to sting. Masa pressed against my back to stay balanced. Steady breathing. Steady hands. No panic. Definitely not a tourist. Behind us, headlights appeared. Black SUV. Then another. Juma glanced into the mirror. We are being followed. I noticed. The SUVs accelerated through traffic. Russian syndicate vehicles. Armored. Expensive. One of the rear windows rolled down. Gun barrel. Left. Masa shouted. Juma leaned hard just as automatic fire shredded the road behind us. Pedestrians scattered screaming. Cars crashed. A fruit stand exploded across the street in a shower of mangoes and splintered wood. And somewhere between the bullets, the rain, and Mosa's arms wrapped around my waist, I realized something deeply inconvenient. I didn't think she was trying to kill me anymore. Which meant something worse. She probably needed me alive. Juma drove like a man negotiating directly with death. Fast. Loud. Slightly offended. The motorcycle tore through central Dar es Salaam while rain hammered the city flat beneath sheets of silver. Behind us, the black SUVs stayed glued to our tail like starving hyenas. One clipped a taxi. The taxi flipped. Nobody stopped. East African cities understood one brutal truth better than most places. Survival first. Questions later. Where are we going? Masa shouted over the storm. Juma answered before I could. Depends who's shooting. Comforting, she muttered. Another burst of gunfire cracked behind us. Bullets sparked off a roadside barrier. Juma swerved through a gap between two trucks barely wide enough for the motorcycle. Horns screamed around us. A fisherman carrying baskets of red snapper cast as we sprayed floodwater across his stall. Then Masa leaned close to my ear. They're herding us. I looked back. She was right. The SUVs weren't trying to ram us anymore. They were steering us toward the industrial district near the port. My stomach tightened. No. Juma heard it in my voice. What? They know where the warehouse is. Silence. Even through the storm, that sentence landed heavily. Because only 4 people on Earth knew about the warehouse. Me, Juma, a dead accountant in Zanzibar, and the man who betrayed me. 10 minutes later we abandoned the motorcycle beneath an overpass near the harbor. Container cranes loomed over the docks like giant skeletons against the lightning. Cargo ships groaned in the distance. The air smelled of diesel, salt water, and rain-soaked rust. Juma bent over breathing hard. We should leave the city. Too late. Masa scanned the darkness carefully. You keep saying things like that. Because they keep being true. She ignored the sarcasm. What's in the warehouse? I looked at her. Thunder rolled across the harbor. You first. Her expression barely changed. I asked you. And I noticed you avoided answering. Juma looked between us nervously. You two flat like people with unresolved trauma. Quiet, we both said together. That almost made Garata smile. Almost. She folded her arms. Fine. I'm from Johannesburg. I guessed. I used to work private security. You shoot too well for mall security. A pause. Then, I worked for a syndicate. There it was. Not shame. Not pride either. Just truth delivered cold. Rainwater dripped from the ends of her braids while distant ship horns echoed through the port. What kind of syndicate? I asked. The kind politicians pretend not to know. South African organized crime. Johannesburg cartels were vicious in ways East African crews respected deeply. Smarter networks. Better weapons. Less emotional. They killed like accountants balancing spreadsheets. What happened? I asked quietly. Her jaw tightened. I left. You can't just leave people like that. I know. Something ancient flickered briefly behind her eyes then vanished again. Pain. Real pain. Before I could ask more, Juma suddenly froze. Headlights. Approaching slowly through the container yard. 3 vehicles. No lights except parking beams. Hunting mode. Inside, I said. We slipped between stacks of shipping containers while rain echoed through the maze of metal corridors. The warehouse waited near the waterline, hidden behind abandoned fishing equipment and rusting fuel drums. Old German structure. Colonial era. Forgotten by the government years ago. Perfect for hiding dangerous things. Juma unlocked the side entrance. The heavy metal door groaned open. Darkness swallowed us whole. Then Masa stopped moving. I noticed instantly. What? She stared toward the center of the warehouse. At the floor. Water dripped somewhere in the dark. Slow. Rhythmic. Then lightning flashed through the broken skylights overhead. And illuminated the body. Male. Hands tied. Throat cut. Fresh. Juma swore softly. But Mosa's face changed completely. Not fear. Recognition. You know him, I said. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. That's impossible. I stepped closer to the corpse. Mid-40s. Grey beard. South African. Expensive clothes. One finger missing. Then I saw the tattoo near his wrist. A black crown wrapped in snakes. And suddenly I understood why Masa looked like the world had tilted sideways. Because I recognized it too. The Black Crown Syndicate. Johannesburg's ghosts. The people nobody survived betraying. Masa backed away slowly. No, she whispered. No, no, no. You know him, I repeated. Her eyes locked onto mine. And for the first time since I met her, I saw genuine fear. That, she said shakily, was supposed to be my father. For a moment, nobody spoke. Rain battered the warehouse roof while lightning flickered through shattered windows, turning the dead man's face pale blue, then black again. Juma finally broke the silence. That's your father. Masa shook her head slowly. He was supposed to be. I watched her carefully. What does that mean? She swallowed once before answering. My father died when I was 12. At least, that's what I was told. The sentence hung heavily in the dark. Masa stepped closer to the corpse cautiously, like she expected it to suddenly breathe. The Black Crown Syndicate raised me after he disappeared, she said quietly. They told me he betrayed the organization and ran. And now? Her eyes hardened. Now I think they lied. Outside, tires crunched across wet gravel. All three of us froze. Vehicles. Close. Very close. Juma moved toward the side window and peeked carefully through a crack. They found us. How many? Too many. Perfect. Masa wiped rainwater from her face and looked at me directly. You still haven't told me what's inside this warehouse. I hesitated. Then realized it no longer mattered. They are not after money, I admitted. They're after information. That got her attention. What kind of information? I walked toward a rusted storage crate near the back wall and unlocked it. Inside sat a black waterproof case. No markings. No labels. Just death wrapped neatly in plastic. Masa frowned. That little thing caused all this. You'd be amazed what governments kill to keep buried. I opened the case. Juma inhaled sharply. Inside were hard drives. Documents. Satellite phones. Passport copies. And photographs. Hundreds of photographs. Port shipments. Politicians. Military officers. Cartel leaders. Police commissioners. People from Tanzania. Kenya. Mozambique. South Africa. All connected. All dirty. Masa stared at one particular photograph longer than the others. A South African minister shaking hands with a Russian arms broker. Beside them stood the dead man from the floor. Her almost father. The Black Crown was moving weapons through East Africa, she whispered. Not just weapons, I corrected. People too. Her eyes snapped toward mine. Human trafficking. That changed everything. Even criminals had lines. The truly terrifying people were the ones without any. Juma suddenly stepped backward from the window. They are coming in. The warehouse door exploded inward a second later. Gunfire erupted instantly. We scattered behind machinery as bullets ripped through crates and concrete. Sparks spread through the darkness. Someone shouted commands in Russian again. Masa fired back calmly beside me. 3 shots. 1 scream. 1 body dropped. Professional. Very professional. But the attackers kept coming. Too many angles. Too much open space. We were losing ground fast. Back exit, Juma yelled. There isn't one, I shouted back. Masa glanced upward suddenly. The roof. I followed her eyes. Old maintenance ladders climbed toward the upper catwalks. Risky. Unstable. Better than dying downstairs. We sprinted for the ladders while bullets chased us through the dark. Juma nearly slipped on rainwater leaking across the floor. Masa grabbed his jacket and held him upright without slowing down. The woman moved like survival had trained her personally. We reached the catwalk just as more gunmen flooded inside below us. Then a familiar voice echoed through the warehouse. Come. Called. South African. Masa. She froze instantly. A tall man stepped from the shadows beneath the catwalk wearing a charcoal coat despite the heat. Silver streaks lined his beard. One cloudy eye stared upward at us while the other remained terrifyingly sharp. No weapon visible. Which somehow made him worse. Masa looked like she'd seen a ghost. You, she breathed. The man smiled faintly. Hello, little lioness. Every instinct in my body sharpened. Not because of the gunman. Not because of the Russians. Because I recognized the look on Masa's face. History. Complicated history. The kind that gets people killed slowly. The man folded his hands behind his back. You've caused me a very expensive week, he said calmly. Masa's voice trembled with anger now. You told me my father betrayed us. He did. You murdered him. No, the man replied softly. Then he looked directly at me. Your friend did. Everything inside the warehouse went still. Even the rain seemed quieter. Masa turned toward me slowly. Not shocked. Wounded. That was worse. Juma looked between us nervously. Boss. The man below smiled faintly, enjoying every second. His name surfaced in my memory like poison rising through water. Victor Dlamini. One of Black Crown's senior operators. Not officially the leader. Men like Victor never sat on thrones. They stood beside them whispering where the knives should go. You are lying, Masa said coldly. Victor shrugged. Am I? Her eyes locked onto mine. Tell me. I hated that look. Because she genuinely wanted the truth. And in our world, truth was usually the sharpest weapon in the room. Masa. Tell me. Below us, the gunman waited silently for instructions while thunder rolled across the harbor outside. I exhaled slowly. Your father didn't betray Black Crown, I said. Victor's smile faded slightly. He was trying to leave. Masa's breathing changed. Small. Unsteady. He found out about the trafficking routes through Tanzania, I continued. Children. Refugees. Missing girls moved through cargo shipments. Her face hardened into something dangerous. And you killed him? No. Victor laughed softly below us. There it is. I ignored him. Your father came to me for help 9 years ago. I moved him out of there before Black Crown could reach him. Masa stared at me. You are lying. I wish I was. Then why is he dead downstairs? Because somebody found him first. Silence. Heavy silence. Then Victor began clapping slowly. One problem with decent men, he said. They always keep souvenirs. He gestured toward the black case. All that evidence. All that guilt. Masa's voice cracked slightly. So my father was alive this whole time. Nobody answered immediately. That was answer enough. For a second, she looked 12 years old again instead of lethal. Then it vanished. Replaced by fury. Pure fury. She raised her pistol toward Victor instantly. You used me. The gunman below reacted immediately, rifles lifting. Victor held up one hand calmly. No, he said softly. I protected you. You murdered my family. I gave you one. That landed harder than the shouting. Because part of her believed it. I could see it in her eyes. The tragedy of broken people was simple. Sometimes the monsters really did raise them. Victor looked up at her almost gently. Come home, Masa. No. You don't belong with him. His gaze shifted toward me. This man leaves bodies and cares everywhere he goes. That's rich coming from you, I muttered. Victor ignored me. You think he saved your father? He asked her quietly. He hid him in this city for 9 years while enemies closed in from every side. Your father died alone in a warehouse beside smugglers and thieves. Masa's hand trembled slightly around the pistol. Not weakness. Conflict. And conflict gets people killed faster than bullets. I stepped closer carefully. Masa. Don't. He's manipulating you. Maybe. Her voice was thin now. But at least he's telling me something. That one hit. Because she was right. I had hidden the truth from her the moment I recognized the tattoo downstairs. Not to protect myself. To protect her. But secrets rarely cared about intention. Below us, Victor checked his watch casually. We are running out of time. For what? Juma asked. Victor smiled. Then the first explosion shook the harbor. The entire warehouse trembled violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Outside, alarms erupted across the port. A second explosion thundered somewhere near the docks. Bigger. Closer. Juma rushed to the window. Oh no. Flames climbed into the night sky near the shipping terminals. Containers burned along the waterfront while sirens screamed across Dar es Salaam. Victor looked almost pleased. "The Russians are removing evidence," he said. Then he looked at me. "And in approximately 5 minutes, they'll blame all of it on Baraka Mshana." Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Masa stared at the burning harbor beyond the windows. Then at me. Then at Victor. Her world was collapsing in real time, and everybody in it had blood on their hands. Finally, she made her choice. She pointed the pistol directly at Victor. "Move your men," she said coldly. Victor's expression darkened. "Masa. Move them." For the first time all night, the old man looked genuinely disappointed. Not angry. Disappointed. Like a father watching his child choose the wrong future. Then he nodded once. The rifles below lowered slowly. But as Victor stepped backward into the shadows, he looked directly at me one last time. "If she dies beside you," he said quietly, "this time it will actually be your fault." Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the warehouse instantly. Then came the shooting. Muzzle flashes burst through the black like camera lightning while bullets hammered the catwalk around us. Juma yelled and dropped flat as metal exploded beside his head. "Move!" I shouted. Masa didn't hesitate. We ran across the upper walkway while chaos erupted below. Somebody screamed in Russian. Somebody else fell hard enough to shake the steel beneath us. Then the entire building groaned. Another explosion outside. Closer this time. The port was becoming a war zone. We reached the far side of the warehouse just as part of the catwalk collapsed behind us. Metal screamed downward into darkness, taking 2 gunmen with it. One kept screaming after he landed. Not for long. Juma kicked open a maintenance door leading onto the roof. Rain blasted into us immediately. The harbor burned beneath the storm. Ships sounded their horns continuously while fire spread between container stacks near the docks. Police sirens echoed across Dar es Salaam, but nobody was coming near this part of the port tonight. Too dangerous. Masa stopped beside the roof edge. Her face glowed orange from the flames below. "You knew my father was alive." It wasn't a question anymore. I nodded once. 4 years. "And you never told me." "I couldn't." "You mean you chose not to?" "Fair." Behind us, voices shouted inside the warehouse stairwell. "Coming fast." Juma looked ready to faint from stress. "Can we do relationship therapy after we survive?" Masa ignored him. Where was he? Zanzibar first. Then Mtwara. Then here. Her eyes narrowed. "You hid him for 9 years. He saved my life once." That surprised her. I leaned against the rain-soaked railing briefly. "Your father was the accountant for Black Crown. Quiet man. Smart. So too much." Lightning flashed overhead. He discovered they were moving trafficked girls through cargo shipments disguised as fishing exports. Tried to expose it internally. Masa's jaw tightened. "And Victor?" "Victor ordered his death." Footsteps thundered closer inside. Juma checked his pistol. "We are seriously running out of time." Masa stepped toward me slowly. "Why protect him?" "Because he reminded me of my own father. Because decent men were becoming extinct. Because I was tired of burying people who tried to do the right thing." But I only answered with, "Because somebody should have." For a second, something shifted between us. Not forgiveness. Something quieter. Understanding, maybe. Then the stairwell door burst open. Gunmen flooded onto the roof. We fired instantly. Rain. Thunder. Muzzle flashes. The world narrowed into survival again. Masa dropped the first attacker with surgical precision. I hit the second. Juma missed everything except the air's dignity. "Sorry," he yelled while firing wildly. A bullet clipped my shoulder. Hot pain exploded down my arm. I staggered sideways. Masa grabbed me before I fell off the roof. You hit. I've had worse dates. This is a date. Emotionally confusing enough to qualify. Despite everything, she almost laughed. Then a familiar voice rose from the stairwell. Enough. Victor emerged slowly onto the rooftop holding a shotgun. Everything stopped. Rain poured around him while firelight flickered across his scarred face. You can still walk away, Masa, he said calmly. She raised her pistol. No. You'd choose him. I choose myself. That landed hard. For the first time, genuine anger cracked through Victor's composure. You think the world will spare you because you discovered the truth, he snapped. There's no clean side here. I know, Masa replied coldly. That's why I'm starting with yours. She fired fast. Victor moved astonishingly fast for an older man. The shotgun roared. Everybody scattered. Juma slipped on the wet roof and nearly disappeared over the edge before catching himself with a scream. I slammed into Victor hard enough to send us both crashing across the concrete. The shotgun skidded away. We hit each other like men who had wanted this for years. Victor was stronger than he looked. Older too. Experienced. His fist split my lip instantly. Mine cracked his jaw. Rain mixed with blood while the harbor burned behind us like the end of the world. Then he pulled a knife. Of course he did. Mzi! Juma shouted. Victor drove the blade toward my ribs. Masa shot him before it landed. One gunshot. Clean. Precise. Victor froze. Slowly looked down at the blood spreading across his coat. Then back at her. Not angry. Just sad. You really are your father's daughter, he whispered. And collapsed into the rain. Silence swallowed the rooftop. Only the storm remained. Masa stood motionless with the pistol hanging at her side. Breathing hard. Watching the man who raised her bleed into the Tanzanian rain. Then distant sirens grew louder. Much louder. Police? Military too, maybe. Juma peeked over the roof edge and swore. We need to disappear immediately. I looked at Masa. She looked back at me. And somewhere between the burning harbor, the dead syndicate king, and the storm crashing over Dar es Salaam, both of us realized the same thing. Neither of us had anywhere left to go. By sunrise, Dar es Salaam looked like a city waking from a nightmare it couldn't fully remember. Smoke drifted above the harbor. Burned containers still hissed near the docks. Soldiers blocked roads while politicians appeared on television promising investigations nobody believed would happen. And somewhere inside every newsroom in East Africa, my face was being blamed for everything. Juma tossed a newspaper across the table inside the safe house. Congratulations, he said. You are now an international criminal. I glanced at the headline. Smuggling kingpin linked to port massacre. Kingpin. I muttered. At least make me sound richer. The safe house sat above an old spice shop on the outskirts of the city. Tiny. Hot. Smelled permanently of cardamom and old wood. Masa stood by the window silently watching the street below. She hadn't slept. Neither had I. People think grief arrives loudly. Sometimes it arrives like exhaustion instead. You should leave Tanzania, Juma said carefully. Masa didn't turn around. So should you? I'm serious. So am I. Juma looked at me helplessly. I shrugged. You'll learn quickly, I told him. South African women don't respond well to instructions. I respond fine, Masa replied. You threatened 3 people before breakfast. That was communication. Fair. Juma raised both hands in surrender and headed downstairs muttering prayers about difficult people. Once he disappeared, the silence settled again. Masa finally turned toward me. You really hid my father all those years? Yes. What was he like? That question caught me off guard more than the bullets had. I leaned back slowly. Quiet, I said. Liked old jazz music. Burned every meal he tried to cook. A tiny smile flickered across her face. He always carried a photograph of you. That broke something. Not dramatically. Just enough to show the damage underneath. Masa looked down at the floor. He came looking for me once, didn't he? I nodded. 3 years ago. Why didn't you let him see me? Because Black Crown was still watching you. She stared at me for a long moment. You make a lot of decisions for other people. Occupational hazard. Another silence. Then softly. He would have wanted to see me anyway. That one stayed in the room. Heavy. True. Outside, the city buzzed awake beneath the morning heat. Vendors shouted. Radios played Tarab music somewhere in the distance. Life continued because Africa had mastered survival long before any of us were born. Then Masa looked at me properly for the first time since the rooftop. What happens now? Dangerous question. Because I knew the answer immediately. What? The Russians lost their cargo routes. Black Crown lost Victor. Corrupt politicians were panicking. And somewhere out there, powerful men were deciding whether we should disappear permanently. But looking at her standing there barefoot in the morning light, wearing one of my spare shirts with exhaustion beneath her eyes, was suddenly felt less important than it should have. I stepped closer carefully. Masa. What? I should have said something intelligent. Something careful. Instead, you almost shot me 4 separate times. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. You counted. I'm concerned about the pattern. That finally made her laugh. Small. Tired. Beautiful. And dangerous to my overall survival instincts. You flirt at terrible times, she said. I survive terrible times. It creates confidence. She shook her head slowly. Then her expression softened. Not completely. Just enough. You know what my father used to tell me, she asked quietly. What? He said people who live around violence too long forget how to sit still. I looked at her. Rain clouds drifted over the city beyond the window while sunlight slowly broke through above the ocean. And was he right? Masa stepped closer until only inches remained between us. Yes, she whispered. Then she kissed me. Not softly. Not cautiously. Like someone trying to remember what being alive felt like after years of surviving instead. Outside, Dar es Salaam roared on endlessly. Inside that tiny room above the spice shop, the world finally became quiet for exactly 12 seconds. Then Juma burst back upstairs holding an assault rifle. We have another problem. Masa pulled away from me instantly. Juma froze in the doorway. His eyes moved from her face to mine, then toward the rifle in his hands. I have interrupted something important, he said carefully. You think? Masa replied. To be fair, he muttered, the timing looked emotionally expensive. I rubbed my face. What problem? Juma tossed a burner phone onto the table. It keeps ringing. Then answer it. I did. And? His expression darkened. It's the Russians. Perfect. Again. The phone buzzed loudly across the table like an insect that knew too much. Masa reached for her pistol automatically. That's usually not a good sign. I picked up the phone. Hello? A calm female voice answered in fluent Swahili. Mr. Mshana. Not Russian. Educated. Controlled. Dangerous. You've had a dramatic evening, she continued. I try to stay busy. You also stole something belonging to us. I think several people have accused me of that this week. A pause. Then? You have 1 hour to bring the files to the Sarina Hotel. Masa immediately mouthed no. Smart woman. I ignored her for the moment. And if I don't? Then the South African dies fast. The room changed temperature instantly. Masa's face hardened cold enough to cut glass. Juma quietly locked the door downstairs. I kept my voice calm. You seem confident. We know where you are. Then the line went dead. Silence. Juma looked ill. That sounded serious. Masa folded her arms. It's a trap. Yes. You're not going. I know. You said that too quickly. Because I was already thinking. Already calculating. That was the real problem with men like me. We treated danger like mathematics after long enough. Masa stepped closer. Baraka. What? You have the look. What look? The stupid one. Juma nodded immediately. Yes. He absolutely has the stupid look. Traitors. Both of them. I walked toward the black case sitting beneath the table. The Russians won't stop, I said quietly. Neither will the politicians connected to those files. Masa leaned against the wall watching me carefully. So what's your plan? I opened the case slowly. Passports. Drives. Photographs. Enough corruption to collapse careers across half the continent. Then I removed one final item hidden beneath the documents. A small black ledger. Handwritten. Old-fashioned. Juma inhaled sharply. You never told me you had that. Because I enjoy surviving. Masa frowned. What is it? The real evidence. Every payment. Every route. Every politician bought by Black Crown and the Russians. Paper records. Impossible to hack. Impossible to erase remotely. And worth killing nations over. Masa stared at the ledger. That's why everybody's hunting you. Yes. And you kept this. I was deciding who deserved it. She laughed once in disbelief. That's an insane amount of responsibility for one human being. She's right, Juma added. You are not emotionally stable enough for democracy. Fair. I closed the ledger carefully. Then looked at Masa. What do you know about Zanzibar? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Tourism. Good beaches. Baraka. There's someone there, I said. An old journalist. One of the few people I trust. Juma blinked. You trust people? Really? It's unpleasant. Masa understood immediately. You want to leak everything? Yes. The room fell quiet again. Because once the information became public, there would be no undoing it. Governments would fall. Cartels would fracture. People would die. But maybe fewer people than before. Masa walked toward the window slowly. You know they'll hunt us forever after this. Yes. And you are still doing it. Yes. She studied me for a long moment. Then nodded once. Okay. Juma looked horrified. That's your response. Masa shrugged. I've had worse relationships. This is a relationship. Nope, I said. This is several crimes held together by chemistry. Juma sat down heavily. I miss when my problems were small. Then downstairs, the tires screeched violently outside the spice shop. Doors slammed. Too many doors. Juma picked through the shutters and saw immediately. Black SUVs. Again. But these weren't Russians. These vehicles carried Tanzanian intelligence plates. And that was much, much worse. Nobody moved for half a second. Then instinct took over. Juma killed the lights upstairs while Masa grabbed the rifles from beneath the bedrolls. Outside, car doors slammed in sharp succession as boots hit the street below. Professional movement. Government movement. The kind that arrives with paperwork after the bullets. How many? I asked quietly. Juma picked through the shutters again. 6 outside. Maybe more in the vehicles. Masa checked a magazine with practiced calm. You know them. Tanzanian Intelligence Bureau, I muttered. That means one of two things. They are arresting us. Juma guessed. Nope, I said. That's the optimistic option. A heavy knock thundered downstairs. Then a voice. Baraka Mshana. Open the door. Masa looked at me. You're popular. I'm exhausted. Another knock. Harder. We know you're inside. Juma raised his rifle nervously. We could shoot our way out. Masa and I both looked at him. No, we said together. Okay, he muttered. Just brainstorming. The voice downstairs changed tone. Come on now. Mr. Mshana. We are not here to kill you. That almost made me laugh. Almost. Because men announcing peaceful intentions while carrying assault rifles usually meant the opposite. Masa stepped closer to me. Do you trust them? No. Do you trust the Russians less? Yes. Fair point. Another silence settled. Then I made the decision. Stay behind me. Masa immediately frowned. That sentence alone irritates me. Please try not to shoot government officials unless necessary. No promises. I headed downstairs slowly. The spice shop smelled strongly of cinnamon and fear now. Through the frosted front windows, I could see armed silhouettes moving outside in the morning heat. I unlocked the door carefully. 3 agents stood waiting. Dark suits despite the weather. Compact rifles. No visible panic. The woman in front was older than the others. Mid-50s perhaps. Sharp eyes. Gray streaks in her hair. Power radiated off her quietly. Not the loud kind criminals used. The dangerous kind educated people used. Baraka, she said calmly. Director. Masa stiffened upstairs behind the railing. She knew the title mattered. The woman stepped inside slowly while the others remained outside. I'm Nima Amani, she said, glancing toward Masa briefly. Tanzanian intelligence. I assumed. Her eyes shifted toward the black case on the table immediately. Of course they did. May I, she asked. No. That almost amused her. Almost. Nima removed her glasses carefully. You've created an international incident. In my defense, everybody else contributed enthusiastically. Juma snorted before catching himself. Nima ignored it. The Russians are evacuating assets from Dar es Salaam as we speak, she said. Black Crown cells are already moving south toward Mozambique. Masa folded her arms. And your solution? Nima looked directly at her. You? Interesting. Masa's expression cooled instantly. I don't work for governments. No, Nima agreed. But your father once did. That hit the room like a hammer. Masa went still. Nima sighed softly. Your father wasn't just Black Crown's accountant, she said. He was an intelligence source. I felt my stomach tighten. That I hadn't known. Nima looked toward me. He approached our office 11 years ago with evidence about trafficking routes through East Africa. We tried to extract him quietly. And failed, I said. We were compromised internally. Which explained a lot. Too much, actually. Masa's voice turned dangerously quiet. So everybody used him. Nima didn't deny it. That's usually what happens to good men in bad systems. The honesty of that answer unsettled me more than excuses would have. Outside, distant sirens echoed through the city again. Dar was tightening. Roadblocks probably already forming. Nima stepped closer to the table. We don't have much time. You want the ledger, I said. Yes. And then we expose everybody simultaneously. Juma blinked. Everybody. Nima nodded. Politicians. Port officials. Police commanders. Black Crown assets. Russian intermediaries. All of it. Masa stared at her suspiciously. And why would your government agree to that? A shadow crossed Nima's face. They didn't. That changed the room. Because now this wasn't an operation. It was betrayal from the inside. Nima reached into her jacket slowly. Juma raised his rifle instantly. She ignored him and produced a ferry ticket instead. Zanzibar. Departure in 50 minutes. There's a boat waiting, she said. Once you reach Stone Town, the journalist named Salaam Khatib will take the ledger. Masa narrowed her eyes. And you? Nima smiled faintly. I stay here and become very unpopular. Outside, an engine roared suddenly from the far end of the street. Fast. Too fast. Nima's expression changed instantly. That, she said quietly, is not my team. Then gunfire exploded through the front windows. Glass detonated across the spice shop. Everybody hit the floor instantly as bullets shredded shelves of cinnamon and dried cloves. Jars exploded. Wood splintered. Outside, engines screamed through the narrow street. Juma fired fast. Wildly. That's definitely not her team. Masa dragged Nima behind an overturned table just as more rounds tore through the walls. I crawled toward the shattered window carefully and risked a glance outside. Black tactical gear. Military-grade rifles. No insignias. Professional mercenaries. And leading them. Russians. One of the SUVs slammed sideways across the street to block escape routes while another group advanced on foot with terrifying discipline. Nima cursed under her breath. They found you faster than expected. That's becoming a theme. An explosion rocked the building next door. Dust rained from the ceiling. Juma looked deeply offended by life itself. I was supposed to be retired today. You're 20 years old. Emotionally, time 90. Masa picked through the broken shutters and fired twice. One mercenary dropped immediately. No wasted movement. No panic. I was beginning to suspect she could probably win arguments with gravity itself. They are pushing left side, she said. Nima nodded sharply. There's an alley behind the kitchen. Too narrow for vehicles, I added. Good. Another burst of gunfire ripped through the storefront. Then somebody outside shouted in Russian. And suddenly everything got worse. Because I recognized the voice. Anton Volkov. Former Spetsnaz. Current psychopath. The Russians had sent their wolf. Wonderful. I stood and fired through the smoke toward the street. The recoil punched pain through my wounded shoulder instantly. Masa noticed. You're slowing down. I'm bleeding artistically. You're bleeding stupidly. Fair. Nima moved beside me while reloading calmly. You know Volkov. He once fed a man to crocodiles outside Mwanza. Juma blinked. That feels excessive. He's Russian, I said. That explains nothing. A grenade rolled through the broken doorway. Everybody scattered. The blast shattered half the building. Heat and dust slammed through the shop while alarms screamed from nearby cars. My ears rang violently as part of the ceiling collapsed behind us. Move. Nima shouted. We sprinted through the rear kitchen while smoke swallowed the front of the building completely. Pots crashed around us. Spice powder filled the air thick enough to choke. Then we burst into the alley. Rain had started again. Had. Dar es Salaam blood beneath silver sheets while market vendors fled screaming through side streets. Behind us, the mercenaries regrouped frighteningly fast. Volkov himself emerged from the smoke carrying a compact rifle. Huge man. Shaved head. Cold blue eyes. The kind of face that looked unfinished without violence. He saw me immediately and smiled. That was unpleasant. Oh no, Juma whispered. Why is the Russian giant smiling? Because he enjoys his job. Volkov raised the rifle. Masa shot him before he fired. The round clipped his vest hard enough to stagger him backward. Most men would have dropped. Volkov just looked annoyed. Run! I shouted. We exploded into the crowded streets behind Kariakou Market while gunfire chased us through the rain. Vendors overturned stalls trying to escape. Fruit rolled through floodwater. Motorcycle taxis swerved wildly between pedestrians. Chaos. Beautiful, life-saving chaos. Because trained killers hated unpredictability. Masa stayed beside me the entire time. Not behind. Beside. That mattered more than I expected. Nima pointed ahead suddenly. There. At the far end of the street, a battered white minibus waited with its engine running. A ferry company logo painted on the side. Our ride. Juma grinned wildly. I love suspicious transport. Bullets cracked behind us again. One struck the wall beside Mosa's head. Too close. I grabbed her arm instinctively and pulled her down just as another bus tore overhead. For one brief second, we crashed against each other in the middle of the flooded street while gunfire screamed around us. Her breathing. My heartbeat. Rainwater sliding down her face. Everything narrowed strangely. Then she looked at me and said the least romantic sentence imaginable. If we survive this, you're explaining why every country wants you dead. Deal. She kissed me once. Quick. Fierce. Then shoved me forward. Move, a Tanzanian. Honestly. I was beginning to like being ordered around by her. We reached the minibus just as Volkov's team stormed into the market behind us. The driver threw open the side door frantically. Go, go, go. We piled inside. The minibus launched into traffic instantly while bullets shattered the rear windows behind us. Juma ducked low, breathing hard. Nima checked her watch once. Then looked toward the harbor. If we miss that ferry, she said quietly, we don't get another chance. And behind us, through the rain-soaked streets of Dar es Salaam, Volkov's convoy kept coming. The ferry to Zanzibar looked far too peaceful for the kind of morning we were having. White hull. Tourists with backpacks. Families carrying luggage. Vendors selling roasted cassava near the terminal. Meanwhile, half of East Africa seemed to be hunting us with automatic weapons. The minibus skidded to a stop near the loading gates. 30 seconds, the driver shouted. We jumped out running. Rain hammered the harbor while security guards yelled at passengers to move faster. Engines rumbled beneath the massive ferry as ropes were already being pulled loose from the dock. Too late. Or almost too late. Stop them, someone roared behind us. Volkov. Of course. His convoy burst through the terminal entrance scattering civilians everywhere. Mercenaries poured out firing into the air while people screamed and dropped behind luggage barriers. Panic spread instantly. Nima spun toward us. Get on the boat. What about you? Masa shouted. Nima pulled a pistol from beneath her jacket calmly. I told you already, she said. I'm becoming unpopular today. Then she turned and opened fire toward the terminal. Absolute legend. Juma grabbed my arm. She's buying time. Move. We sprinted up the loading ramp while bullets cracked across the harbor. Ferry workers dove for cover. Tourists screamed in 5 different languages. Behind us, Nima moved like a woman who had finally stopped fearing consequences. 2 mercenaries dropped. Another stumbled into a luggage cart. Then Volkov himself emerged through the smoke and raised his rifle toward her. I fired fast. The shot clipped his shoulder hard enough to spin him sideways. Volkov looked directly at me across the chaos. And smiled again. Psychopath. The ferry horn blasted thunderously. The loading ramp began lifting. We barely made it aboard before the gap widened between the vessel and the dock. Then all hell broke loose. Volkov sprinted and leapt the narrowing gap like some giant Siberian nightmare refusing to die. He slammed onto the ferry deck hard enough to knock passengers aside. "Oh, come on!" Juma shouted. Volkov rose slowly through the rain holding a pistol now. People scattered screaming around him. Masa stepped in front of me instinctively. "Stay back." I disliked that sentence immensely. "Too bad." Volkov advanced calmly across the rain-soaked deck. "You should have given us the ledger," he said in heavily accented English. "And you should have stayed in Russia," I replied. He actually laughed once. Then fired. Passengers screamed and dropped flat. Masa returned fire immediately while I tackled Volkov sideways into a row of deck chairs. The pistol skidded away across the wet floor. Then it became ugly. Real ugly. Volkov fought like machinery. No wasted movement. No hesitation. He drove a fist into my ribs hard enough to blur my vision. I slammed him into the ferry railing. He headbutted me. I tasted blood instantly. Somewhere nearby, Juma was yelling tactical advice that sounded suspiciously emotional. "Why are you both so large?" Volkov reached for a knife. Naturally. Masa shot the blade out of his hand before he could use it. The Russian finally lost patience. He charged her instead. Big mistake. Masa sidestepped beautifully and drove her knee into his ribs before firing point blank into his leg. Volkov crashed against the railing with a roar of pain. Still dangerous. Still terrifying. But slowing down. Rain whipped across the ferry deck while Zanzibar slowly emerged through the storm ahead like something ancient rising from the ocean. Stone Town. Old secrets. Old ghosts. Volkov looked between the two of us, breathing heavily. "You think this changes anything?" "No," Masa said calmly. "We think it starts something." Then she shot him once more. The railing snapped. And Anton Volkov disappeared backward into the Indian Ocean. Gone. Silence swallowed the deck except for the storm. Passengers slowly began lifting their heads from cover. Juma stared over the railing. "You know," he said quietly, "I genuinely thought he'd survive that too. Honestly." "Same." Masa lowered the pistol slowly. Then looked at me. The harbor fires of Dar es Salaam were now distant smears behind us while Zanzibar waited ahead beneath clearing skies. "We are really doing this?" she asked. I pulled the ledger from inside my jacket. The thing powerful men had murdered for. The thing her father died protecting. Yes. She stepped closer. And after? That was the dangerous question. Because for the first time in years, I actually wanted an after. I looked toward the horizon. Toward Zanzibar. Toward whatever came next. Then back at the South African woman who had arrived in Tanzania intending to kill me and somehow ended up beside me instead. "We disappear for a while," I said. Masa smiled faintly. "With your talent for chaos. Optimism is important in relationships." Juma gagged dramatically behind us. And as the ferry cut across the Indian Ocean toward Zanzibar, carrying fugitives, evidence, and the beginning of several international scandals. For the first time in a very long while, the future didn't feel empty. 3 weeks later, the world began burning politely. That's how powerful people collapse. Not with explosions. With press conferences. Government ministers resigned across East Africa and Southern Africa within days of the ledger leaking online. Shipping executives vanished. Intelligence officers retired suddenly. Russian business fronts closed overnight. And somewhere in Johannesburg, the Black Crown Syndicate started eating itself alive. Turns out criminals hate discovering they've all been secretly recording each other. Who knew? The story dominated every major news network for 11 straight days. Nobody knew who leaked the files. Officially, Baraka Mshana died during the Dar es Salaam port violence. I found that strangely relaxing. Unofficially. Well. Unofficially, I was sitting barefoot outside a small beach house on the northern coast of Zanzibar watching Masa argue with fishermen about octopus prices. Sunset painted the ocean gold. Palm trees swayed lazily overhead. The air smelled of salt, charcoal fires, and cloves drifting from nearby farms. Peace felt unnatural at first. Like wearing somebody else's clothes. "You are being scammed," Masa informed the fisherman confidently. One old man laughed loudly. "You are South African. Everything sounds expensive to you." She pointed at the octopus. "That thing looks emotionally exhausted." I nearly choked laughing. The old fisherman loved her immediately. Everybody did eventually. That was the problem. Masa finally walked back toward me carrying a bag of food and suspicion. "You're smiling. That usually happens during happiness. Dangerous habit." She sat beside me on the wooden steps overlooking the water. For a while, neither of us spoke. Waves rolled gently against the shore while distant taarab music drifted from somewhere down the beach. Then quietly, she asked, "Do you miss it?" I knew what she meant. The violence. The movement. The constant edge. I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I admitted. "Sometimes." Masa nodded slowly. "My father used to say survival becomes addictive after long enough." He was right about many things. The breeze lifted strands of her hair across her face. She looked calmer now. Still dangerous. But calmer. Grief had softened into memory instead of open wounds. And me? I was still learning how to sit still without expecting gunfire. Progress takes time. Juma burst out of the house carrying a laptop dramatically. "You are both famous again." Masa groaned instantly. "No." "Yes." He opened the screen triumphantly. A news anchor appeared speaking rapid Swahili beneath images from Dar es Salaam harbor. Then came blurry CCTV footage of the ferry. Me? Masa. Volkov falling overboard. Ah. Unfortunate. Juma pointed excitedly. "The internet calls you the ghost of the Indian Ocean now." Masa blinked. "That's terrible." "It gets worse," he said happily. He scrolled. "People are making fun edits." I grabbed the laptop. Oh no. Too late. Some teenager had already edited dramatic slow-motion footage of Masa shooting people while emotional music played underneath. The comments were somehow worse. "Power couple fire. She could ruin my life respectfully. African John Wick vibes." Masa stared at the screen in horror. "I hate young people." I was laughing too hard to help. Then her phone buzzed. Immediately, the mood shifted. Very few people had that number. Masa answered cautiously. "Yes." Silence. Then her expression changed. Sharp again. Dangerously sharp. She stood slowly. "What happened?" Another pause. "I understand." Then she ended the call. I watched her carefully. "What is it?" The ocean breeze suddenly felt colder. Masa looked toward the horizon for a long moment before answering. "Johannesburg," she said quietly. "Black Crown just chose a new leader." I sighed deeply. Of course they did. Peace, apparently, had a very short attention span. Masa looked down at me. "You know what this means?" "Yes." "We're going to South Africa, aren't we?" I stood slowly beside her. The Indian Ocean stretched endlessly before us while somewhere far away, another storm was beginning to wake. Then I smiled slightly. Looks like the next story starts in Johannesburg.
Thank you for listening. Tell me, which African country would you like the next mafia story to be based in? Drop your answers in the comments and I will take it from there. Like, share, subscribe. Because somewhere in Africa, another story is already unfolding.